incredibly kind introduction, and thank you also to the Chancellor for this honor to be a part of your celebration. So firstly, congratulations, class. Congratulations to not just you, but to your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, your faculty, your staff, your friends. I mean, everybody has been quite instrumental in getting you here, so many, many, many congratulations. I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of your celebrations today. I mean, this is a major milestone in your life, and you're very lucky to be able to celebrate it this way. I think when I graduated from LSR and Delhi University, I don't remember having such a nice convocation ceremony. So you're very lucky to have this wonderful memory, and it's a great, great honor for me to be a part of this. So, I was trying to think about what I could tell you about, to somebody in your position going out into the world. And while Professor Gopinath did say that you have to have mind without fear, when I think about where I was at your point, I think there was fear. There was trepidation. There was a lot of joy. It was an accomplishment, so there was much to be excited about. But there were also a lot of questions about where exactly am I headed? What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Am I going to make the right decisions? And so I thought I would make a few points that maybe might assuage some of your fears, and give you some examples from my life about how I dealt with some of those concerns over the years, and hopefully, and from some other people's experiences, and hopefully that will, assuage some of the concerns that you have. So firstly, I just want to remind you that you've had an absolutely fantastic education over here. So just that makes you stand apart from many, many, many other undergrads who are graduating. I was looking at your website and the kind of liberal education you have had, and when I read it, the words out there are just so powerful. The idea is to become well-rounded individuals who think critically, communicate effectively, and become leaders with a commitment to public service. You cannot underestimate how blessed you are to have had an education that puts emphasis on this. Let me give you an example. For instance, the simple question of communication. When I was an undergrad and I was studying in Delhi University, I think communication was the last thing we paid attention to. And I remember when we used to write pieces of, essays, the whole idea was to be as complicated and as abstruse as possible. Because then that would make you look smarter, right? The less comprehensible you are, the smarter you are. So the fact that you actually have writing classes that teach you how to communicate clearly is a big virtue that you really can't underestimate. Because as you go in life, you will see that communication is a big part of it. Secondly, you've also taken a variety of cross-disciplinary courses. I was looking at the foundation courses that you take, literature studies, environmental studies, social and political formations. What fun. This is again, a wealth of experience that you're going into the world with. So that is phenomenal. Now, that said, of course, there's always uncertainty about where you're headed, what's going to come next. And so here we're going to dive into my little 2 cents of what might help you stay a little calm. So the question is, should you have all the answers at this point, right? Now that you're graduating, at this point should it be crystal clear to you, what is it that I'm going to do? Is this the right job that I took? Am I making the right decision going into another degree? Am I making the right decision to stay here or to travel out or go outside and study? Do I need to have all the answers? And the first thing I want to say of my three points that I want to make, the first point I want to make is that you don't need to have all the answers. And it's perfectly fine if you are still in a state where many things are unresolved in your minds. And it's perfectly fine to be that way. And why do I say that? Because I just want to tell you that I myself am completely an accidental economist, right? I'm of course now eating, sleeping, breathing economics, but when I was a student in school, until my 12th grade, I did science. I was physics, chemistry, math, biology. I grew up in Mysore, I guess it's called Mysuru now. And trust me, no parent in Mysore wanted a kid who was going to do economics. I mean, the whole idea was we want somebody who's going to be an engineer or a doctor. So as if people said, well, wow, my kid wants to do economics. And so how did I end up doing economics? Again, it was completely one of those accidents where my father said, well, I have two daughters. My older daughter should be an engineer. That's how it was decided back then. And my second daughter should be in the Indian Administrative Service. And well, somebody told him that, well, if she wants to be in the Indian Administrative Service, it would be great if she knew some economics. So I was sent off to Delhi, to Lady Shri Ram College, and I interviewed for the, at that time they were interviewing people, for students for getting into these colleges. Of course, I would never get in now. Would you get the cutoffs in LSR? It's impossible. So I went in, I came from Mysore, I came to Delhi, and I was interviewed. And I somehow made it. I didn't know anything about economics. But I knew math and I knew science, and so they said, well, I guess that's good enough. And they took me in. And so that's how I started my career as an economist. So I have none of the luxury that you had, which is you get a year and a half to figure out what is it that you want to do and which subject you want to major in. So that itself puts you leagues ahead of where I was. And, you know, I did okay. How did I continue? Well, I loved it. I found out that I actually did like economics a lot. And I found out that I had very little administrative skills. And so there was no point in me going into the IAS, but instead I should continue a career in economics and in research. And so that's how I went on with it. And I have many faculty, many of my colleagues at Harvard were people who came, you know, with phenomenal backgrounds. Some of their parents were economists. Many of them had put a lot of thought into figuring out whether they wanted to do economics versus something else. It was a completely studied decision. And I was this person who just completely came accidentally into it. So, I guess that's my first lesson to you, is that it's perfectly fine if you don't know all the answers. You know, you could be good enough, at least good enough to teach at Harvard, and you can get very far in life. You will figure it out along the way. The first point continues, while it's okay not to know or have all the answers, it's simply not okay not to give your absolute best to whatever it is that you're doing. So you have to make sure that even if you're completely clueless and you're reading a piece of work and it's possible that you might never want to read it ever again, but for that moment you're committed to it and you want to give it the time and you want to put in sincere effort to make sure you do it. And why do you want to do that? Because that's the only way you will figure out what exactly is it that you want to do with your life. And every step of the way. And this doesn't stop now, it goes on into, you know, all the years of your life, knowing every step that you want to do. The only way you can convince yourself about something is by putting in the time. Now, I mean, of course, I was a bit kind of annoyingly sincere. I have many of my friends who said that. But I think that's a very, very important trait to have. I'm a big believer in what Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, Outliers. I don't know if you've read it, it's a phenomenal book, where he says that the magic number of greatness is 10,000 hours of practice. That is the bottom line. I think if you want to look at outliers and you want to see people who succeeded, what looks like flamingly successful people, the bottom line is they've worked really, really, really hard at it. And again, I quote from him where he says, success is a function of persistence and doggedness and the willingness to work hard for 22 minutes to make sense of something that most people would give up on after 30 seconds. That's the difference between being a successful person, if that's what you want, relative to not. And one other feature that was very helpful, something I don't really have, but I try to remind myself is useful to have, is to be what's called irrationally optimistic. Okay? It is one of the best traits you can have in life. Some people are born with it. Okay? Some people are naturally irrationally optimistic, or at least optimistic for sure. I was never one of those. I was always one of the pessimists and always worried about all the things that could possibly go wrong. But there is science behind this. It's not something that I came up with. This is, psychologists will tell you this, that it actually helps to be irrationally optimistic, which is that even if you do you make all your calculations of what the positives and the negatives are, and it adds up to being something that maybe you should try, right? I think you should be a bit of that. It helps you get up every day in the morning. When things are going wrong, it helps you get up every day in the morning and get on with what you want to do. So be irrationally optimistic, and if it doesn't come to you naturally, just work it. Fake it. Do what you have to do. And I'm sure each of you know some friend who tends to be irrationally optimistic, and I think you will see those people tend to be happier people and live happier lives. So go for that. So that's my first point. The second point is to never forget that your unique background is what will distinguish you from everybody else. When you step into the world, you will always feel overshadowed by some people. It could be a professor. The professors obviously taught you, so they must be smarter than you. You feel overshadowed by them. You can feel overshadowed by some of your classmates. Sometimes you have super bright classmates who are inordinately gifted, and you can feel overshadowed by them. And if none of those people, if you don't feel overshadowed by those people, trust me, there's always some dead person who's there to overshadow you. Right? So in economics, it doesn't matter how good an economist you get, there's always Keynes or Adam Smith who was smarter than you and did everything before you. So that's always going to be the case. So don't spend your time trying to worry about what other people are up to and who knows more than you do. Just jump into it as your own unique person. And again, here I just want to give you a little bit of an example of my own life. When I went to my PhD at Princeton, my thesis advisors were Ben Bernanke and Ken Rogoff. So Ben Bernanke, as you probably know, or if you don't know, that's fine. He went on to become the chair of the US Federal Reserve. So like the governor of the RBI, he was the governor of the US Federal Reserve System, which is a fairly important position. And Ken Rogoff had my job previously. He was chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, and not to miss, he was also a chess grandmaster, right? Just to throw that in. So I was doing my thesis work under them, and it was overwhelming because there was at least two phenomenal people who clearly are very successful. So I could have done two things, which is one, I could have said, well, they obviously got it right. They did, everything they did seems to have worked out, and I should completely follow what they do. Or I could have done the second thing, which is that do something completely different from what they did, at least in terms of what I work on. And I chose the second. And I think I'm way better off because of that. Both my advisors were working on issues of advanced economies. When I was at Princeton, they cared mostly about the richer nations of the world in terms of policy, in terms of policy questions, in terms of data work. But I came from India, and I did my undergrad between 1989 and 92, which covers a period when India had an external account crisis, when basically the government was short of funds to pay for certain things. And the International Monetary Fund came in, and there was financial assistance provided, and along with the Indian government, a program was put in place, and that's when the whole liberalization of 1991 in India started. So that interested me, and that excited me a lot. So when I finally decided what pieces or what topic is it that I'm going to work on, I decided I was going to do something on emerging markets. And to date, I did work on capital close to emerging markets, and to date, my most cited work is on emerging markets. I think it makes a big difference. And if you want to be very good at something, if you want to create your own brand, you really have to rely on your own personal, unique strengths. There's always a temptation when you see somebody who's successful to say, well, maybe they obviously know something more than I do. There's always a temptation to kind of exaggerate their virtues and to completely discount your own virtues. And I'm just here to tell you that please don't do that. It's their unique skills that made them where they are, but it's your uniqueness that will get you to what is it that you want to accomplish, and don't try to become one of those. Don't put somebody too high on a pedestal and try to become that person. This has carried on in my work at the International Monetary Fund. Again, where I spent time thinking about emerging markets, about macroeconomic policy for emerging markets, much more than most other previous chief economists did, because I think of this background that I have had. So again, let me just reiterate the fact that it's really crucial to embrace and leverage what is unique about your background, about your culture, about your family, your own family's history, your experiences, your parents' experiences, because that's what will give you a unique perspective, a unique purpose, and that will distinguish you from the crowd. Speaking about being unique, I just want to give a shout out to all the women, girls who are graduating this year. I was thrilled to hear that you make up 56% of the class. So you're actually the majority. Again, something that speaks very highly to Ashoka and its vision. So to the women, I just had my own little message I wanted to give you, which is, firstly, that you have absolutely nothing to prove. Okay? At this point, it's not about whether women have to prove something. It is about society having to recognize what women have already done and can do. So, please be your strongest advocate. Seek women mentors, mentor other women, and have a good time. And if anybody reminds you that they're trying to do you a favor because you're a woman, again, shrug it off. You absolutely deserve it, okay? And on the topic of women, I wanted to flag one statistic that really bothers me about India. I mean, there are a few that do. But there's one that does, and that's the women's labor force participation rate. If you look at what's happening to female labor force participation in India, it's gone down from 35% in 1983 to 24%. So it's already started with very low numbers, and over the last 15 years, it's actually gone down. And if you look at other countries with comparable levels of income, this is a very low number. So in the same period that India has grown in great strides, and there's been a tremendous amount of growth, it is the case that women have been dropping out of the labor force. So why is that? It's not the case that they don't have enough education, because education levels are rising. It's not the case that they're in the rural area as opposed to the urban area, because urbanization has happened, there are lots of women in the urban areas. But it is the fact that there have been important reasons why women haven't been able to get into the workforce, and one is the lack of opportunities. Secondly, it is still very much the case that women have to do the 90% of the work in the house. And the security issue remains. I mean, I cannot tell you how much, as an undergrad in Delhi University, I was terrified about getting on in Delhi buses. And it's still, unfortunately, very much the case. It is still the case. So, I hope that in your chapter of dedication to public service, maybe that's something that some of you can change and make happen, that in 10 years from now, that this would not be the case, that we would have the right ecosystem for women to be in the workplace. And again, on dedication to public service, I think one of the most important things you can do is be a discerning citizen. There's way too much of fake news, of misinformation that goes around. And even if you just with that, if you can be the truth teller, if you can be the person who points out and lets people know around you that this particular WhatsApp message is junk, that would be super helpful. That would be public service right there. Okay, now I'm down to my last and my third point, and I can see everybody's lining up for more important things. So let me finish up rather quickly. which is, I'm going to put on my economist hat and answer the question of what exactly does the future of work look like? What do your income opportunities look like going forward? Those of you starting a career at this point, what is it that you need to think about? So I just want to make a couple of points there. The first point is that you are also lucky in entering the workforce at a time when India is growing at over 7%. There is enough research that's been done to show that if you enter the workforce at a time when the economy is doing well, you have a permanently higher income for the rest of your life. So you are in great shape right now. Secondly, as I'm a chief economist, I recently had put out the World Economic Outlook, talking about where growth would come from in the future. And what we pointed to was that if you're going to go 5 years into the horizon, India was going to be a very important source of growth for the world economy. So again, you're in the right place in terms of location, and you're doing great over there. Then, of course, there is the question of jobs and automation. I think everybody's worried about it. What does that mean? Are we going to lose all our skills going to become irrelevant because we're going to basically lose jobs to machines? So there are some scary statistics out there. So McKinsey put out an estimate in 2017 that said 14% of the global workforce may be at risk of job loss by 2030. And their number for India was that about 9% of jobs in India would be taken over by automation. But again, what we also do know is that the people who are most skilled are the ones who survive these kinds of trends. So if you look at it historically, when you had technological change, everybody was worried about what would happen. This is not the first time we've had technological change. We've had many episodes of technological change, and humanity has survived. And there's always been jobs, new kinds of jobs that come up. And so, given the kind of education you have, which is to be a critical thinker, to look at things in a cross-disciplinary approach, those are exactly the kind of skills that are going to help you adapt to this changing environment. And so again, you're very well placed to do that. And I think to some extent, we are more in the times where, Swami Vivekananda's quote where he said there is only one purpose in the whole of life, education, becomes even more important. Because it is something that is going to be lifelong learning for you, because as new technologies come up, you're going to have new skills, and that's going to be, it's going to be important for you to continue lifelong learning. And I'm inspired by the Vice Chancellor's use of a quote from a Hollywood movie, so that maybe I should also use one of those. So just off the top of my head, I guess one of my favorite ones is, if you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean, there's a line where one of the pirates basically says to the other, because the other person is saying, well, no, these are rules, and you have to engage, have a conversation, you can't throw me overboard. And the other person says, well, these are only guidelines, not rules. Do you remember that line? Okay. So, I think that's a good philosophy to have in life, which is that while you've certainly been taught, you've had great education, life is not about rules. These are about guidelines. They just provide you guidelines. But ultimately, you kind of decide what is it, that's how you want to interpret, what is it that you want to do. And there is no one way of getting things done. Okay? So, with that, I'm again going to congratulate once again the class of 2019. And lastly, I really hope you cherish your own unique background with all its warts that will distinguish you from the crowd. So take great pride in it. And of course, always give back to society. Thank you.